What if the ultimate victor of the current naval flashpoint in the Persian Gulf is simply a group of wealthy marine insurance brokers? These powerful underwriters sitting quietly in London offices currently dictate the survival of the most critical global shipping lane. The legendary A-10 Warthog is violently shredding Iranian speedboats, but the brutal tactical reality remains an absolute nightmare today. America's incredibly dominant maritime force is currently struggling to secure this vital choke point despite deploying massive armadas. 120 warships represents the exact number of Iranian vessels the United States Navy has totally destroyed since spring. 2 massive carrier strike groups and 8 Aegis destroyers project roughly $40 billion of naval firepower across the oceans. Yet the terrifying economic result is that the strategic Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to all international maritime trade. 95% of commercial shipping has completely vanished, while 3,000 massive oil tankers sit anchored and going nowhere. The powerful American fleet did not lose a single ship or a single combat engagement while eliminating the entire Iranian submarine force. Every major surface combatant vessel that Tehran ever built was systematically hunted down and entirely dismantled by precision weapons. And yet, the vital shipping lane stays completely shut, while the stranded oil causes the global world economy to bleed billions every week. The fundamental reason for this financial catastrophe is a brilliant strategic naval concept widely known as a dangerous fleet in being. The hostile enemy deliberately avoids destroying our giant nuclear aircraft carriers because they simply do not need to sink them to win. Tehran simply maintains a highly credible threat of cheap attack vessels to keep commercial maritime insurance premiums astronomically high. This escalating conflict is definitely no longer a traditional battle of heavy warships, but a brutal war of pure global economic attrition. The most capable naval fleet in human history desperately contacted the Air Force to deploy a legendary Cold War relic for pure survival. This aging 50-year-old airplane was originally designed in the 1970s to violently kill Soviet tanks on the plains of Europe. Arrogant Pentagon officials called this rugged machine entirely obsolete and thoroughly unfit for modern warfare until this exact crisis. To fully understand why a massive carrier air wing cannot solve a problem that this Cold War relic easily fixes, we must study the water. The actual navigable corridor for massive commercial shipping is a highly restricted 6-mile littoral combat environment. America's traditional blue water naval superiority becomes entirely useless inside this incredibly congested and dangerous shallow water. The hostile coastal waters actively conceal thousands of highly dangerous fast inshore attack craft operated by the Revolutionary Guard. These extremely small composite vessels easily reach terrifying speeds while seamlessly blending into the heavy civilian maritime traffic. The brutal enemy tactical doctrine involves launching massive, coordinated swarms to completely overwhelm sophisticated defense sensors. Dozens of these disposable explosive boats aggressively attack from every conceivable direction to create absolute radar chaos instantly. This terrifying asymmetrical warfare strategy deliberately forces an expensive destroyer to make incredibly difficult targeting decisions. The highly advanced fleet desperately struggles to accurately track these incredibly tiny and exceptionally fast fiberglass marine threats. The most advanced billion-dollar military radar systems were never fundamentally designed to effectively track such tiny coastal anomalies. These cheap attack boats constantly ride extremely low on the ocean surface to successfully avoid early detection by modern naval warships. Capable of easily exceeding 70 knots in open water, these tiny interceptors move dramatically faster than standard military targets. Every single fiberglass hull carries a surprisingly heavy payload of anti-ship explosives designed to permanently cripple a large vessel. An unexpected suicide strike from just one maneuverable craft can easily mission kill a sophisticated guided missile cruiser. The defending American captains must simultaneously calculate dozens of incoming hostile vectors while avoiding innocent civilian casualties. Saturation attacks remain the absolute core philosophy of this highly unconventional and incredibly deadly Iranian maritime strike force. They understand that overwhelming the limited processing capacity of a mechanical defense system guarantees a successful hull breach. This highly congested brown water battlefield completely neutralizes the incredible technological advantages of the modern United States Navy. The fundamental reality of this specific conflict centers completely around a brutal mathematical concept called the cost-exchange ratio. Let us carefully examine the terrifying financial math where a single sophisticated SM-6 interceptor missile costs over $4 million. Launching a multi-million-dollar defensive weapon at a remarkably cheap fiberglass boat represents an undeniable strategic loss for America. A highly advanced Harpoon weapon system was originally engineered to reliably track massive enemy cruisers across the open ocean environment. It fundamentally struggles to successfully target incredibly cheap composite skiffs, doing 70 knots between massive commercial cargo ships. The incredibly powerful F-18 Super Hornet requires $30,000 per flight hour and flies entirely too fast to identify targets. A standard defensive weapon system completely empties its entire magazine in 20 seconds and requires 4 long minutes to fully reload. The heavy 5-inch mechanical gun system fires 20 rounds per minute, which is completely hopeless against 50 incoming suicide vessels. The terrifying enemy swarm doctrine is deliberately engineered to force the massive guided missile destroyer to exhaust its expensive weapons. Deploying incredibly expensive blue water munitions into a highly congested brown water environment is absolute financial suicide for the Navy. The prestigious American military proudly brought a highly sophisticated surgical laser into a vicious coastal knife fight demanding a shotgun. The legendary A-10 Thunderbolt currently serves as the ultimate economic equalizer rather than just a simple close air support aircraft. This highly rugged mechanical machine completely reverses the terrifying financial attrition strategy deliberately deployed by the enemy. That massive 7-barrel Gatling cannon rapidly delivers highly destructive depleted uranium rounds at an absolutely terrifying velocity. The exact tactical mathematics reveal that a standard combat burst costs roughly $130 per mechanical trigger pull. A trained combat pilot easily shreds a heavily armed Iranian attack vessel valued at roughly $275,000. Achieving that exact same maritime destruction with a sophisticated SM-6 interceptor requires spending over $5 million American dollars. This shocking calculation represents a massive categorical shift in the brutal underlying economics of modern naval surface vessel warfare. The terrifying firepower of that massive heavy cannon makes a continued financial blockade entirely unsustainable for the hostile adversary. For engaging highly evasive fast boats mixed with deadly attack drones, the aircraft utilizes extremely cheap laser-guided rocket munitions. The calculated operational cost for each precision-guided rocket launch is exactly $35,000 from the military budget. Delivering absolute precision guidance at the approximate price of a standard civilian sedan completely changes the coastal battlefield. For targets lingering at a medium range, the pilot simply fires an infrared-guided Maverick missile to safely ensure complete destruction. This specific guided missile costs roughly $150,000, which remains significantly cheaper than an interceptor. Every single operational capability of this Cold War legend perfectly aligns with the brutal financial realities of this dangerous ocean. This highly specialized mission profile officially designates the heavily armored jet for strike coordination and reconnaissance operations. The capable aircraft essentially functions as an apex maritime predator, continuously hunting dangerous vessels across the contested water. An advanced stealth fighter requires incredibly high speeds to maintain lift and burns through its aviation fuel at a catastrophic rate. This legendary rugged machine provides truly unmatched battlefield loiter time while circling the dangerous combat zone for several hours. The highly unusual straight wings consistently generate aerodynamic lift much more efficiently at slower speeds than modern swept designs. When a supersonic jet desperately crosses the narrow shipping lane, its sophisticated cameras only view the surface targets for 2 seconds. Distinguishing an armed Revolutionary Guard suicide boat from a harmless civilian fishing trawler at those extreme velocities is impossible. The heavily armed attack aircraft cruises at a remarkably slow 300 knots while executing its deadly maritime patrol loops daily. This incredibly deliberate cruising speed gracefully gives the experienced pilot 3 times longer to visually confirm a hostile presence. The aggressive combat pilot literally looks out the glass canopy to physically see the bolted rocket launchers before pulling the trigger. This incredible ability to visually distinguish complex maritime threats easily ensures that the massive naval corridor remains sanitized. What is currently unfolding above these contested waters represents an unprecedented joint strike convergence of American military power. The rugged Air Force attack jet does not operate alone because it constantly receives direct targeting data from capable Navy helicopters. Those highly advanced MH-60R Seahawk rotorcraft constantly illuminate hostile moving targets for the circling heavy attack aircraft. When the burning sun finally sets over the Persian Gulf, the terrifying AC-130 gunships arrive to provide continuous nighttime overwatch. This highly coordinated, overlapping network of mechanical aerial firepower creates an absolutely impenetrable shield over the brown water. Multiple distinct branches of the armed forces are seamlessly collaborating to completely dominate this incredibly hazardous maritime zone. By deliberately outsourcing the chaotic surface engagement to heavy aircraft, the massive guided missile destroyers conserve their arsenals. The incredibly powerful naval warships can finally preserve their highly expensive vertical launch system cells for truly massive threats. The sophisticated Aegis combat network fundamentally remains the ultimate protective umbrella, but it absolutely requires operational space. Distributing the intense combat load across multiple airborne platforms successfully prevents a catastrophic depletion of defensive missiles. A massive coordinated swarm attack previously possessed the terrifying potential to entirely drain 96 interceptors in mere minutes. Iran committed a catastrophic strategic blunder by arrogantly assuming the traditional American blue water fleet would fight entirely alone. Their entire asymmetrical swarm doctrine heavily relied on mathematical ammunition exhaustion without anticipating massive aerial support. The incredibly adaptable American military completely rewrote the coastal tactical playbook overnight to achieve total combat dominance. The ultimate conclusion of this complex naval warfare equation is incredibly straightforward for any competent military strategic planner. Selecting the absolutely perfect tactical tool is vastly more important than blindly deploying incredibly expensive modern technology. The powerful Navy was perfectly engineered for deep water operations involving massive capital ships and highly complex long-range weapons. This congested maritime environment completely demands durable aircraft carrying heavy cannons and incredibly cheap guided rocket munitions. The ultimate irony is that the perfect tactical weapon is an aging jet that the modern Air Force desperately wants to completely discard. Spending exactly $10,000 per kill easily outclasses launching a $5 million defensive interceptor into the night sky. The massive American military-industrial complex constantly prioritizes manufacturing incredibly sophisticated and highly expensive weapons. Arrogant Pentagon officials continuously dream of futuristic laser weapons and stealth bombers flying thousands of miles above the clouds. However, the brutal reality of the Persian Gulf violently shatters those incredibly expensive dreams with cheap fiberglass suicide vessels. Global warfare is fundamentally an economic contest, where the side that exhausts its financial resources first inevitably loses the battle. Tehran fully understands this brutal economic reality and designed an entire naval strategy to easily bankrupt the massive American fleet. They do not magically possess the massive industrial capacity to rapidly build giant nuclear supercarriers or advanced stealth destroyers. Their incredibly pragmatic coastal engineers mass-produce thousands of tiny disposable boats equipped with exceptionally cheap explosives. This asymmetric warfare doctrine forces the massive American military to safely spend millions of dollars simply swatting away small gnats. Without the continuous protective presence of the slow, heavily armored jet, the entire strait remains an incredibly dangerous maritime trap. A massive global economic depression would violently strike immediately if commercial oil shipments completely ceased passing through there. London insurance firms rely on the guaranteed destruction of these small enemy attack boats to safely underwrite massive commercial cargoes. The brutal mechanical roar of the heavy Gatling cannon literally ensures that the global financial economy continues functioning every day. Yet arrogant military politicians stubbornly refuse to properly acknowledge the undeniable strategic value of this extremely rugged airplane. They actively argue that the aging airframe cannot possibly survive a contested airspace dominated by modern surface-to-air missile systems. That specific argument ignores the fundamental reality that this particular maritime conflict is clearly not a traditional modern air battle. The attack jet flies extremely low and securely under the protective umbrella explicitly provided by the massive guided missile destroyers. It actively operates as an incredibly lethal extension of the surface fleet rather than a traditional independent aerial bombing platform. Retiring this perfectly adapted mechanical machine without a highly capable direct replacement is a completely unforgivable strategic error. A sophisticated military drone carrying a few light missiles simply cannot replicate the overwhelming sustained firepower of a heavy cannon. Modern laser weapons are totally wonderful, until a swarm of 50 explosive vessels suddenly attacks your isolated warship simultaneously. When that terrifying combat scenario finally unfolds, the isolated warship desperately needs an endless stream of depleted uranium bullets. Fundamental engineering reality clearly dictates that you simply cannot successfully hammer a rusted nail utilizing a delicate glass wrench. You must truly respect the extremely dangerous coastal environment and adapt your weapons to these incredibly unpredictable, chaotic domains. The narrow shipping lanes absolutely do not care about the incredible billions of dollars spent on highly classified stealth fighter jets. Those dangerous brown waters demand raw kinetic energy continuously delivered at a highly sustainable and extremely viable economic price. Our military leadership must thoroughly study this specific conflict and absolutely refuse to abandon highly proven battlefield tools today. The ultimate global victor is fundamentally determined strictly by the brutal, logical, mathematical equations of simple cost-exchange ratios. We strictly refuse to blindly worship the sophisticated weapon because we deeply worship the brutal operational mathematics of surface war. The powerful U.S. Air Force actively fights to permanently retire the legendary Warthog by the very final end of this current decade. Imagine a terrifying future where this legendary jet is entirely sent to the dusty boneyard and permanently removed from active naval duty. Following that absolutely disastrous retirement, a massive lethal swarm of 500 enemy FIACs violently breaches the coastal strait. What specific tactical military asset can finally step in to properly fill this massive maritime gap without totally bankrupting the Navy? Let me clearly know your exact tactical military solution and detailed operational defense plans right down in the active comments section.